Go ahead. You can start your thing.
Okay, Michelle, hi, welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. We're going to jump into it. Okay. So you can see my screen. I've got my dot loop open. Nod if it's yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So what I want, are we recording or do you want me to record? Sharon, I lost your guys' audio.
Good.
Oh, no, not, I could hear you. Sorry. Can you, are you recording this on your computer or do you need me to?
I'm recording it.
Okay, awesome. So guys, the topic of today's session is contingencies, okay? And when I say contingency, I specifically mean home to sell contingency. Everyone's gonna write an offer for when you're representing a buyer, and everyone, when you have a listing, you're gonna have an offer come in and it's gonna have contingencies in it. You know, an inspection period is a contingency, a mortgage approval or financing, you know, or appraisal. Those are all contingencies, right? Those are things that basically allow the deal to be terminated without penalty. I guess I don't know if that would be the Encyclopedia Britannica version of the definition, but it's outs, you know, reasons for outs. So
I'm having
this is
trouble
something.
connecting to the internet.
Sorry.
Take a look at the app section.
Stop it, Alexa. So one of the contingencies that I want to specifically talk about today was a home to sell contingency. Okay. I suspect if you haven't been in this business that long, you probably don't know what they are or think that there's no reason to have to know what they are because there's no way that an offer would get accepted with one. But the backstory on essentially what is one. Imagine you have a client that has a lot of equity in their home or you know, will be planning on using the equity that's in their home to purchase their next home. And they're in this like conundrum, right? Because they want to buy a new house, but they can't really buy that house or at least close on that mortgage until they sell their existing home and are able to access that equity. Has anyone been in a situation like that, right? It's the chicken or the egg predicament.
That's my personal situation.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about that. So I'm not going to dig in too deep, but I suspect you have equity in your current home, Megan, right?
Yeah.
And in addition, you may or may not be able to buy a new home, right? So let's say let's say your house is worth $200,000 and you owe $125,000 on it, right? So you have $75,000 in equity, but you don't have the money, the funds and cash that's liquid in order to buy a new house, right?
Right.
Or you don't feel comfortable doing that. So you want to sell your house first, but at the same time, you sell it, you put your house on the market right now and you sell it, then what? You know, if you haven't found a house, then you're potentially, you know, going to have this money come in after closing, but you know, you're going to be stuck being homeless, right? So you don't want to wait to not look at homes, but at the same time, you can't buy something right now. A home to sell contingency is something that's going to help bridge that gap. Okay. Now, it's not going to work all the time. It's not going to be necessarily accepted by a seller, depending on the situation, right? If I've got a seller that has 5 offers come in on their home and all 4 of them, you know, are clean offers with normal contingencies such as an inspection or appraisal financing, and then the last one has this home to sell contingency, I might not risk taking my home off the market or at least going changing it to CCS, and we'll talk about that in a second, if that, you know, for that deal, unless the price or the other terms are really, really appealing. Okay. So in a really competitive seller's market, it's a challenge to have a home to sell contingency even considered. right? And then I also want to impress the fact that most people don't understand what they mean and the intricacies of them. And it's important for you to know that, not just for you as a listing agent to understand what it means, but as a buyer's agent to be able to educate your client as well as the other party of what that would mean should they accept your offer with a contingency attached to it. Okay? Questions so far? No? Okay. I have pulled up, as you can see, I'm still using dotloop. There is in the PA, right? And our purchase agreement, there is a section at the very bottom where it says additional documents attached, right? This is where you're supposed to select the boxes for whatever it is that you're going to also include with this offer. And one of them is called 72-hour contingency. Okay. There's another one that just says contingency sale addendum. So depending on what essentially you're doing or attaching, you would click one of these. Now, has anyone ever submitted an offer where the buyer's current home is already under contract and is maybe waiting on the appraisal or just waiting on closing?
Me.
Okay, Sharon. So in that regard, would a 72-hour contingency or a 48-hour contingency be applicable?
No, it would not.
Okay. So what you write just like in this to still protect your buyer should something fall apart with that deal?
I would say that the home is contingent upon the closing of MLS number X, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yep.
Rosie.
Hey,
Rosie.
Phil, can you mute yourself, please? So, yeah, absolutely, Sharon. So it would be something like an under 32 additional conditions, basically saying, hey, listen, my buyer's house is already under contract. It's already passed inspection. It's already passed appraisal. We're simply waiting on the closing. But to protect my buyer, should something happen at the 11th hour, because we know it potentially can, job loss, something, I'm still going to put in there that this offer is just contingent upon that closing, right? Okay, and that's fine. And you should be able to do that, right? Maybe your buyer doesn't want to go out and look at houses till they get there under contract, but then once they do, they want to move forward. The 72-hour, 48-hour contingency is really if it's not listed yet, or if it's listed but it's not under contract yet. Okay, does that make sense? So that what Sharon just said is really important line, because you want to make sure that you're protecting your buyer at all stages. Okay,
Well,
so if they have a home,
Why don't you define specifically what the difference between those two is, like by definition?
yeah, okay. So a home to sell and a home to close contingency are two separate things. So when you look at the 72-hour, the 40, I don't know why it's called 72-hour, because on the actual thing it's called 72/48. It allows you to pick one of the two. But what this contingent sale addendum is for a situation where your buyer who wants to put an offer on a home has a property that is either not listed or is listed but hasn't gone under contract yet. So let's just start at the top. Date, property located at. This is the property that you're putting an offer on, right? Not the buyer's current home. And it simply states, it is understood and agreed that the sale of this home is contingent upon the sale of the buyer's present home at 123 Main Street, Anytown, USA. So what this is saying is this purchase of what they want to buy is contingent upon the sale of the buyer's current home. This contingency shall remain in effect until. Okay. So this is, well, what would you put there? Well, it depends. Okay. And it depends on where things are at, right? Of course, when you're representing your buyer, you want to farthest out date as possible, right? If I'm a listing agent, I want to shortest date as possible. But you have to understand, depending on where your clients, their house is at. I've submitted an offer contingent upon the sale of the buyer's home when it wasn't even listed yet, right? So I had to account for a few days. I was going to get photos done. I was going to get paperwork done. in MLS done. So I put 45 days, right? So I put out 45 days. So this contingency shall remain in effect until whatever, just count out 45 days. Okay, so I did that to say, all right, in 45 days, I should have it on the market based on average days on market. I'm hopeful that we're under contract with a buyer. Does that make sense? It is.
Sold. I did my house this way.
So,
Yeah, so not sold, but under contract. And we'll talk about why that's important in a second. Okay. And it says, it is further agreed and understood that such and such company, maybe that's Remax Classic, continues to market the home for sale. Okay. So what this means is the property that your buyer is submitting an offer on, you're making it clear that the company that's listing that property is still going to continue to market it for sale. Okay. They are required per our MLS rules to update the status in MLS from active to what we call CCS. Does anybody know what that stands for? Contingent, continue to show. Contingent, continue to show.
yeah, we have to like back up a little.
Yeah.
Are you clear on what the contingency means at all?
Yeah, well, I know that he's talking about the person, who has a house and then he wants to buy a house. So the house that he's buying is contingent upon him selling his house.
Correct,
And
right, because he needs
so-
the money.
Right, and so when he get to this line, he said the contingency should be effective until 45 days or whatever, he said, what does that mean? When
That
is he-
means that if, okay, so
So
seller
it's,
one
Yep.
is accepting an offer from buyer one, okay? Buyer one needs to sell his own home, right? Because he needs that
45
money.
days.
Well, depending on whatever number you put on there,
Oh.
right?
That's tough.
So
Okay.
that's right.
so it's a stopwatch.
Contingency
it's a-
that remains in effect.
Which means
Yeah.
no one loses any money or,
Yes,
okay.
so.
And we'll get to that in a second. But this is a date, your drop dead date. This seller is giving me and my client a specific amount of time in order to try to get our house under contract, right?
Or it's a specific amount of time to lift the contingency.
Well, yes and no,
Technically.
because the dates down here determine what happens next. Now, this date, if this date comes and you still haven't sold the property or gone under contract, rather, you can extend it with an addendum.
So that's
Right.
why I'm confused, because it's like, so what if they don't sell a house after 45 days? Then what happens after
Well,
that?
both
But-
parties have to agree to extend it.
Okay.
Yes.
If the seller does not agree to extend it,
And
the buyer that offers,
So does that mean they have to sell it, or is that's in the
okay,
contract?
yeah, all right.
Okay.
So there's a difference between going under contract. There's a difference between selling and closing,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
That's why I kind of was talking about it being so many days until you lift the contingency, right? Because we can get into the weeds on this.
It's think of it, don't overcomplicate it. You have, if this is accepted, this seller is giving you until this date that you enter in to get your buyer's house under contract.
Under contract,
Not sold.
Right.
forget about sold.
Right.
Under
okay.
And And again, and just bear with me because there's more to this, okay?
Right.
But that's the amount of time that they're agreeing to at this point to allow this contingency to extend to. Now, other things can happen during that period of time, which I'll get to. But if you come to this date and your buyer has not gone under contract on their current home and the sellers have not received another offer and you all want to extend this 30 days, write an addendum simply stating that, okay? And that all terms and conditions of this are still in effect. Okay? So
It's the seller and the buyer, because if you don't have the 45 days, if you have any offers, he can take it.
Yes.
Or he can,
Well, just let it go, because there's.
Yeah.
let's move on. I'll answer all your questions. I
You'll
promise.
answer a bunch of questions when you get through it.
So during this time, you're basically stating that the listing agent is still going to continue to market to that home. And again, change the status to CCS, okay, which is contingent, continue to show. Therefore, still allowing that seller to entertain offers, okay? Different than a backup offer though, all right? A backup offer means this offer is in place should the first one, right, have a mutual release, right? That second offer, that backup offer comes into first position. This is a little different, okay? What this means is that you're going to continue to market this home for sale, and if a second agreement is accepted by the sellers, right, the sellers are going to provide the buyer, your client, your buyer, with a first right of refusal. Meaning, Mr. Buyer, we've accepted your offer contingent on the sale of your home. We have received another offer. Okay? You have a decision to make. You can do one of two things, and you have a specified amount of time to make that decision. In this case, 72 hours. You can also check 48 hours. If I'm representing my buyers, I want to give them as much time as they can. Okay, so that's why I would select 72, but it's all a negotiation when you're writing this addendum. So they have the ability, your clients then decide within this period of time, should they want to do one of two things. Do they want to negate the contract and allow that seller to move on with that other buyer? Or are they willing to waive their contingency at that time, right? And say, well, crap, I don't want to lose out in this house. We're waiving the contingency at this point. Let's move forward. Okay. It's risky, and it depends on where your buyers are at, right? So if your buyers know that they just got 10 offers and they're negotiating them, they're going to feel comfortable maybe doing that. Right. And it also depends on how much earnest money we're talking about, right?
And maybe, well, never mind. I was going to confuse things. Forget it.
Okay. So if said contingency is not removed from the first agreement in writing in care of broker within the time stipulated above, again, whatever hours you've selected, the first agreement shall be declared null and void, and the second agreement of sale will be automatically in effect. Meaning, if your clients don't remove the contingency within that specified period of time, they're out. That deal's off. Your buyers will get their EMD back, but they've lost that ability to buy that house. And the buyers of the first agreement, your clients in this case, shall have no further claims, and the seller hereby directs and authorizes the selling agent that is holding the deposit to return the buyer's deposit. Okay? We've accepted your offer contingent upon the sale of your home. We receive another offer. We give you notice. You don't respond within that period of time. You're out. New guys in. You get your money back.
Matt, can you repeat what the first agreement means in the second agreement? Like which is what?
So the first agreement is the agreement between your buyer and this seller. Okay, your client, you are the first agreement.
Okay.
When another offer comes in, when that seller receives another offer, right?
Yeah. Okay.
They're essentially telling you to shit or get off the pod.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Now, are they going to do that if that offer's super low? Probably not. Right? If it's at or above what they've currently accepted, maybe they will, right?
Yeah.
Now, as I talk about this, and I don't want to get in the weeds, but Sharon, I'm just trying to wonder, like, do you have to prove it? I don't know. Anyways.
There must be, I imagine that you need to provide evidence of the other.
Some sort of code of ethics. Okay. So what that basically means is that then your clients have two paths. They're either terminating the agreement, right? Because they don't feel comfortable lifting it. They still haven't sold their house, whatever. Or they're saying, okay, we're going to lift it because we don't want to lose on this house. We understand that now this deal is non-contingent. Mortgage application will be made in accordance with the agreement of sale. Okay.
Hold
so
on.
that's-
We got a
Yep.
question. Go ahead.
So that means that the second agreement is that they still want to move forward even though the.
Second agreement was with new clients, different
Oh,
offer. Your
okay,
buyer's left
okay.
out in the cold.
So the first one is void, the second one is move forward.
So really quickly,
if the first position does not respond, now if they do respond within this period of time, they have the ability to lift the contingency on their agreement, not allowing the seller to accept that other one.
right.
Okay.
So let's talk about really quickly varying situations that could be risky or less risky for the buyer client, right? If their house was just listed and they were getting showings and they don't have any offers yet, it might be too risky for them to lift that contingency, right? Because they don't know what's going on. Maybe they've had 20 showings and 4 offers on the table or 5 or whatever, and it's still risky because they haven't accepted anything. They're not sure what's going on, but it feels a little better because if one of those offers doesn't work out, you probably have a few other ones to pick from, right?
Yeah.
Less risky still. Okay, you accepted an offer, but you haven't had the inspection or the appraisal yet. I'm moving from less risky to safer, right?
Yep.
The other one might be, okay, you had an offer, you had your inspection, you settled it out, you're just still waiting for the appraisal. So there's still another shoe that might drop. So it's a little sticky, and it's risky, but you're pretty far down the road. You should be okay. If you've already passed the appraisal, you should be in good shape. However, I just had a deal that we kept extending, and I was informed Monday night when it should have closed 3 weeks ago that it's not approved, everything's out. The whole thing just fell apart.
Oh.
So you never really know until everything's signed. However, there are varying levels of risk as to if you want to lift that contingency or not.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
So yeah, let's talk about the next 2 items and we'll kind of bring it full circle. If the buyer's home, okay, first agreement, right? Your client, you wrote this up. If the buyer's home is sold during the contingency period, I don't really like the word sold,
I don't either.
right? I would say gone under contract,
Yeah.
right? Accepted a contract. If the buyer's home has accepted a contract during the contingency period, right? During this, whatever days you have in here, this contingency clause shall be removed by the buyer in writing, right? So you just simply do a follow-up addendum. And this agreement of sale shall become contingent upon the closing of the sale of the buyer's present home within 45 calendar days. Okay, so what that means is if I am representing the buyer, we get this contingency accepted. 2 weeks into it, I get an offer on our house. We negotiate it. Great. We accept it. Boom. This whole purchase of this home becomes contingent upon the closing of that home, right?
Within 45 days of
Within
what
45 days. Yep.
the new
So I would put in here enough days to make sure that you know, based on that deal, right? If that deal has to close within 35 to 45 days, put enough in here so you can make sure that you can perform.
Does that make sense?
So what is that?
Is that possible to close in 45 days or what's the average?
Yeah, better be.
Typically is always
2 months.
It's
Third-
been 30 to
I
45
mean, on a financing deal right now, I'm seeing 35 to 45 days. I mean,
Sure,
lenders used to say I can close in 30 days or less. That's a joke right now.
Yeah.
Because they're just so busy between refis and the most recent boom. So I would put 45 days. Put longer. I mean, whatever. Again, you're representing your client, so you just have to know what's appealing to a client, what's appealing to a seller. So you want to put farther out as possible. But this is what I would typically use. I just kind of pre-filled this in.
Because
Now-
let's be real, if you've got it all signed and you get to the 45th day and
Well, they're not gonna
underwriting,
stop it, right.
well, right, you get to the 44th day and underwriting at the other lender's really slow and you get the lender to talk to this other client, they're going to extend it
Anyways, it's not-
probably.
yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't they?
Right.
Right? But if you start off and put 60 on that might scare somebody off and go, why? Why would you do 60? Go ahead.
Now the next one. This is probably the trickiest one. In the event the buyers herein remove this contingency clause in writing without selling their present home, the buyers agree to close on this transaction within X amount of days from the removal of this clause. Why would they do that? How would that come about? That your buyers would remove this contingency clause without selling their present home.
If they got another offer, the sellers got another offer.
If they were presented with this first right of refusal, right? If these sellers presented your buyers with, hey, you have to decide to either terminate this or waive the contingency and close. All right. It's basically obligating your buyers to close on this sale, regardless if they've closed or not on their previous home. Does that make sense? Should the closing not take place for any reason other than a delay caused by seller, the buyer shall forfeit their deposit in full termination of this agreement. Okay. So if your buyers do waive their ability to close in good faith, thinking that they still can or that there's still a chance, but for whatever reason they don't, they understand that their deposit's going to go to that seller if they don't close. For any reason.
Protections there. Any
Yep.
And that's
That money goes hard. That money goes hard. You can't. Okay, so I've heard a lot of people say, well, they can waive it, and then the mortgage lender can write a denial letter because they can't really qualify for both. Blah blah blah. Nope. All your other contingencies, you're at that point, that money's hard.
Go ahead.
So this is just this whole thing has to be filled out from the beginning from the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, if your buyer's offer is contingent upon the sale of their home.
There's a lot going on. That's what I'm saying. It's a lot.
The devil's in the details,
Yeah.
right?
We just bought a house this way where it was under contingency. We threw another contingency on top, and now we had race to see who could sell the house and get it under contract first.
How can they accept two contingencies at the same time?
That's what we did.
That doesn't seem right.
One. So the first house was at $400,000.
Well, it was dominoes, right?
No, not dominoes. One house accepted two offers, both contingent. Whoever closes first wins.
Oh, wow.
I never agreed to that, but glad that worked out for you, Derek.
Yeah.
It's all sketchy.
I mean, I've had a situation where a buyer's house had an offer. It was with in our office, Kim. Kim represented a buyer. She was buying my client's property. Kim's buyer was contingent upon, or our deal was contingent upon Kim selling their house. And then my client's deal and their buy was contingent. So it was a dominoes, but it all worked out. Right. But there's a lot more to it. Okay. And does this make sense, at least in theory? And I'll answer questions. I want to talk about a few scenarios because the eyes glazing over is common. Therefore, many people, including a buyer that I'm working with right now, agents don't understand it or think it's too complicated or think it'll never come together or think it's a waste of time. And guess what? The agent that does take the time to explain this and understand it is going to win. Because if you are an agent that says, I don't want to waste my time with a buyer until they don't have a home to sell, right? You are never going to be able to help those move up buyers because not everyone has the funds set aside to be able to buy without selling their current home. And as the market shifts, which it inevitably will, these will be more commonplace. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
The first number of days that we put up,
Yeah.
you were talking about okay, you have to get pictures done and whatever.
Yep.
45 days to me, right? And this market seems so long. What, I mean, if we were really going to have a shot at this with a buyer, what do you think a realistic amount of days there to go under contract would be?
Well, that's a good question, and it depends on where that client's at with their current home. If you have already done those things and you're putting it on the market tomorrow, it might be 14 days. It might be 7 days if you're pricing it extremely aggressive. All you want is the time that it takes from the today to get it under contract, to accept an agreement on it, right? Not to close on it, just to accept an agreement.
Right.
And the farther out date, the better for us, for your client, really, to give them amount of time. But if I'm really selling this to a seller and a listing agent, I want to make it, as juicy as possible, right? So
Right.
I might put a shorter period of time. And that's going to depend on what's going on in your local market. Where is that house at? And that's the other part to this, which we'll talk about. If I'm a seller and I'm a listing agent and I have a seller and we accept an offer, or we receive an offer rather, that's contingent upon the buyer's current home, I want to know a bunch of stuff. I want to know where's the house at? Of course, it's going to have the address here. What are you pricing it at if it's not already listed? What are you doing? Professional photos? How do you market listings? I'm going to go and look at all of that agent's previous listings. I'm going to grill them, because I'm not going to advise my client, right, to change their status to CCS, because I'll tell you, you guys, I know on here it says they can receive another offer, but if you mark your house at CCS, do you know how many showings you'll get? Drastically less, because one, most agents don't want to be the second runner, the first runner up. Number two, a lot of buyers portals are not set up to even show them CCS properties. Would you agree with that, Sharon?
Yeah, because you don't want to get your clients' hopes up looking at houses that are never available to them anyway.
Yeah.
So as much as you're going to still allow backup offers, you really don't want to do anything unless you're pretty confident in the saleability of that house. So if I'm the buyer's agent writing this up, I am pitching, just like I would normally pitch my clients to a seller. I'm going to pitch that property. I'm going to say they've got all these updates and it's immaculate and it's staged and I'm doing professional photos and I'm pricing it here and here's a CMA, right? I am selling it. I'm selling to them the fact that I'm confident, they should be confident that we're going to put this home under contract within a realistic amount of time. Okay. So whatever the average days in market are for a certain price point or whatever's going on trending, I mean, that should be part of your decision here. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So this sounds like a lot, right? and it is, but it's relatively straightforward. You just have to understand what each of the terms and such mean. Now, I've seen people snake in, completely keep this out and just snake in the in an agreement that under additional provisions is just contingent upon seller's or buyer's current home, and there was none of this in there. That's a little gray, right? That's why we have this agreement to stipulate what happens if, right? Now, if you're representing a buyer and you have a seller that agrees to mark the home pending and not accept for backup offers, by all means, do it. I mean, the sellers are just at a disadvantage there.
Mm-hmm.
So, when a listing agent or a seller says, yeah, we would accept an offer contingent, but we want to keep it on the market or keep a first right of refusal, that's where this addendum clarifies things. Okay.
It just seems like this for the seller, it's like you wouldn't find a lot of these anyway, because like when someone lists their home, they're ready to list, it's like they're waiting on the buyer.
Well,
no, I don't understand what you're saying.
Let's talk. I think I know what you're going with. Talk about this. If I'm a seller, I want to list my house. I want to close on it. I want to get a buyer that doesn't have any mess, and I want them to inspect it. I want them to apply for the mortgage. I want them to go. But if I have a unique home, an expensive home, a home that's been sitting, a home that I don't want to take a price reduction on, a home that everyone said requires too much work, and I get an offer like this that comes along and the price and the other terms are pretty acceptable, I might consider this, right? This is when we coach our clients, right? Our buyers. Oh, I keep getting outbid. Have you looked at the homes that have been sitting on the market for a while?
Matt, my parents did the same thing. They sold their home 2 years ago up north, about 5,000 square foot. And they had a buyer from out of state. And it took about 6 months for them wait for that buyer to close on their house in order for them to sell it.
Yeah. Okay, great. I mean, great example. We are in a unique market right now, guys, where like the idea of this seems silly, because why wouldn't the sellers just sell? Because why would they take this? It's not always like this. And it's not always like this at every price point. You look at the average days on market for houses that are in this area, 600 plus. I mean, they've probably been on the market for a while, some of them, right? Not all of them. Conversely, maybe there's a house where the seller can't go lower, doesn't want to go lower. Those are the ones you have to identify with your buyer if they have to buy with a home to sell contingency that they're going to be able to go after and potentially win. Are you going to be able to get your buyer under contract on a hot property that's priced incredible if you have a home to sell contingency? Probably not. Make sense? So,
Yeah, I have 2 questions.
yeah.
So if you were the listing agent
Mhm.
and you had, let's say, 3 offers, 2 of them are list price, and there's one that's, say, 10 grand above, appraisal guarantee, and a contingency. All the terms, right, for everything else are similar amongst the 3. What would you advise your clients?
Well, it depends on what's most important to my clients. If they're in a position where they have to sell or they want to sell in order to go on the next stage of their life, they're probably looking for surety of close, meaning they would sacrifice a little bit in price in order to have more security to close, right? If they're not in a hurry or they absolutely want to hold out for the absolute most amount of money, maybe they would consider the home to sell contingency. Maybe that the buyers who are submitting an offer contingent upon the sale of their current home have $150,000 updated cute ranch in Livonia. And I'm like, that'll close, that'll sell. I don't have any apprehensions about that.
You
Right.
can also, pump up the EMD, if you want, things like that. You could write into the contract that part of the EMD is non-refundable if your people are really cautious about that,
Yeah.
You can customize, some of that stuff, right?
Yep. Remember, all terms, everything is negotiable. But in that scenario, Megan, it depends on what's most important to your clients. I'm not going to advise them a blanket statement without knowing what's most important to them.
Right. So my other question is about now if you have the buyers
Mhm.
on the PA
Mhm.
for the down payment, are you basing that off of them selling their home,
Yes.
putting say 20% down?
Yes.
They were pre-approved.
Yeah. So that's a good question. If I'm writing up the offer, it's contingent upon the sale of the buyer's current home. I'm going to write up the offer as if they're selling on that and they're not owning 2 homes. Okay. And I'm also going to where it says closing, I just put TBD, because that is, I'm not going to put, I don't know when it's going to close yet. It's going to be determined when they when the contingency is removed in writing, right?
So Megan's question, just kind of quickly is that how they're being pre-approved, right?
Well, so good question. Yeah. So let me give you a scenario. Right now, I'm dealing with a buyer who has to sell their home in order to purchase a new home, right? Or at least that's what they came. And they said, would that seller accept a contingent offer? So we go down that path a bit and the seller says, or the listing agent seller says, yes, but we would want first right of refusal, yada, yada, yada. Okay, great. And then my buyer speaks with the mortgage lender, and the mortgage lender says, actually, you can qualify for another loan, not contingent upon the sale of your current home, right? Can you scrounge up 5%, right? Can you buy this new home? And you can actually write up an offer not contingent upon the current one. Now, we know that would be ideal for you to sell that one, but you can buy this new one and not have this contingency. And if you sell your current home and close, you can put more money down before. Or if you sell your home but don't close until after you buy this home, right, with only 5% down, you can take that lump, throw it down at that, and do what's called a recast feature, which is basically, instead of just throwing money at a principal, actually changing your payment, right, and re-amortizing the entire loan without having to refinance. I know that probably just blew
What
some
was that
people's
called?
minds.
Recast. You
A
can
re-
do it,
a
I think you
recast.
can do it once.
Yeah.
In the life of the loan within the first 6 months or year, there's
For a
things-
small fee, yeah.
yeah,
So yeah.
say-
So let me just explain what that. Let's say I have $100,000 mortgage on a house, and it's worth 200. I owe 100 on it, right? And then grandma dies, and grandma gives me 50. I get $50,000. If I just threw that on to my payment, I just wrote a check for 50 grand to my mortgage company. They're going to reduce my principal, right? But my payment doesn't change, right? But if you do a recast, that $100,000 loan balance, I throw a $50,000 check at it. Suddenly now the $50,000 that I owe is spread out over the payment terms of what I previously had, essentially lowering my payment in half, give or take.
Because the interest.
That's in the beginning, right?
Yeah, you can't typically, not all loan products can do a recast, and that can typically only be done once in the first 6 months or something like that. That would be that's a Brent question. But the my point is that if your buyers say they have to sell their current home, there may be alternatives, right, that can help bridge the gap. Like you can borrow money from your 401k as long as you pay it back without penalty, as long as you pay it back within a period of time. So there's creative ways to potentially bridge this gap if this type of contingency wouldn't be accepted, or they don't want to use it, or they want to be more competitive. But you'll have to work with your lender partner to kind of discuss what those buyers' options are.
Do you see bridge loans being used that much?
I had somebody who thought they were going to do a bridge loan, the buyers I have right now, and they went back and their lender said that those are starting to get yanked.
What is a bridge loan?
Yeah.
It's
A bridge loan essentially takes some of the equity of your current home, gives it to you, and allows you to bridge the gap so you can put it down in your new home. The problem with that is not only then does it increase the amount you owe in your first home, the lenders increased risk because now you have two homes, right? And lower equity. And, history shows us the less equity someone has, the more likely they're going to default, especially in an uncertain economic times where people potentially would be facing a job loss or this or that. It's just risky to the lender. But again, if you can get approved for that second loan without selling your current home, meaning your debt to income ratio can actually support both payments, and like I said, you have the ability to get that money somehow, whether a 401k or something, or even a gift, right? You could potentially qualify for that new home without selling the current one. Now, that's not your intention. You're not going to hold on to this as a second home, but it'll allow you to be competitive and go out there and win an offer to buy a house while you're trying to prepare your current house to sell. So this is a really good scenario for the type of buyer that's, the type of client that I work with often, that's a move up, right? They're selling a house in a really competitive price point, and they're buying a home in a little bit less competitive market, right? They can take advantage of what's going on right now. Would you agree, Sharon?
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? I want to make sure everyone understands this and asks whatever questions, because this is being recorded and it'll be beneficial at a future date, because I know you guys will run into this. Nothing? You got it? You mastered it?
When the time comes.
Can't
That's all I can say.
Go back.
It's really important for you to also, if you are representing a buyer, not only make sure the seller understands this, or the listing agent, right? I mean, is to make sure your buyer understands what this means, because you have to explain to them that a first right of refusal allows the seller to continue to market the home for sale. If they don't understand that, this isn't something that you're probably going to want to pitch to them, because if they're not clear on that, and all of a sudden you come back and you say, hey, guess what? The seller, they got another offer. They're calling us for this first right of refusal. You have to decide if you want to waive the contingency or terminate the deal. If they didn't understand what that means, it could be a real issue, especially if If we're 2 weeks into this was accepted, we're 2 weeks into this, what's already happened typically?
Inspection and appraisal.
Maybe not appraisal, but definitely inspection. Definitely inspection. So if my buyers submit an offer contingent on the sale of their home, and they in 7 days get this property inspected, and then on the 10th, and then they're fine with it, or we negotiate something or whatever, and then the 10th day, we're given a first right of refusal, and they can't perform, they are out that inspection money, right? Just like a normal deal, where if they terminated it, they'd be out. But in this regard, it'll be a bitter taste in their mouth, right? So they need to understand what this means, what they're potentially risking. Now, will they get their EMD back? Yeah, of course they will. But they're not going to get that inspection money back. Now, if you want to be really aggressive, you could put in to say the inspection will be done within a specified amount of time when this contingency is lifted. You could do that. I mean, that basically extends it out, right? There's risk involved with that, of course. And I think buyers want to know if this house is good sooner than later. But, you know, there's a lot of different things to look at. So your sellers, you're the listing agent, right? If they don't understand these, you know, they have to understand it. But your buyers also have to understand what is the potential scenarios that could happen. Yes, Michelle.
Muted.
Sorry. So if let's say I'm the listing agent and an offer like this comes in and my seller wants to accept it with these contingencies, as a listing agent, how do I go? Because if it's going to go to CCS, how do I convince the seller that I'm still going to try to market their property in the best light, knowing in the background that it's going to affect the number of showings we have, continuing to move forward just to make sure that regardless of what happens with the current buyer, if for some reason it does fall apart, we're preparing our seller for a strong second offer or backup offer.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. You know, therein lies what your marketing is, because your marketing shouldn't be just listing it on the MLS, although that does spider it out to everywhere. You can continue to market on Facebook or other things, but it will show as contingent on sites like Zillow. It will show as CCS in the MLS. You know, I've seen sellers or listing agents rather respond to this with the caveat that their listing is going to remain active on the MLS. That's an aggressive counter, but that would be looking out in their best interest, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's a potential risk, but it all depends on the situation where, you know, if I haven't gotten any offers, or if it's been sitting, or, you know, it all depends on the scenario of what that seller's gone through to this point, right? If this is day one and you're asking me to take it from active to CCS, even if you give me 20 grand above, it probably doesn't make sense for me at this time.
Right.
Unless we write in that listing is going to remain as active on the MLS. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Does anyone else see any potential benefits, pitfalls, challenges on either end with
A
this?
side note is, if it's a house that looks good, you know, because things are going quickly, this is just another reason that, you know, if you reach out to an agent and say, hey, have you gotten any offers in on this yet? Because just because it's marked active doesn't mean they don't have something cooking on it. You know, it's always good to just be informed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot of listings right now, but I've in the past few weeks, I feel like buyer agents have been really proactive before they've even showed properties, reaching out and saying, what's going on? Is it available? Do you have any offers? Because they're just getting beat down, and the buyers are getting burned out of seeing homes or losing out on homes that are active right on the MLS, but then they, you know, are unavailable when they want them.
That's the only thing. Like,
Because if the listing agent takes it down, they're essentially not going to get a second offer. No one's going to come and look at it. What's the point?
Are we
Now,
allowed, like, meaning KW Advantage, to leave it as active instead of CCS?
If it's well, that's a Pete question. If it's agreed upon in writing by both parties, I would say yes. However, if it's not agreed upon by all parties, we are obligated by the MLS rules to market CCS.
What, 72 hours, isn't it? Or isn't there? There's a
That's what-
time frame.
No, that's what this is.
I think there's a time frame that you can drag that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
There-
short period of time
That's,
before you get your hand slapped.
yeah, I wouldn't mess around. I mean,
I play by the rules.
yeah,
I just understand the rules to take advantage of them.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, look
It
into
was
it.
like a Friday or Saturday or something.
It might be next business day or, something
there's
like
a-
that.
It's not long, but there's a,
Yeah.
It's 5 days to report listing sold and 2 days, Monday through Friday, to report a pending. I don't see CCS on here.
So business days.
Yeah.
So if this all went down on Friday night, technically you wouldn't have to market till Tuesday.
right.
I mean, I've done this, and I saw that it was still active in the MLS, and I was on their ass. I said, "Market, you better market CCS."
Yeah.
I was looking out for my client. I didn't want them to get a backup offer, or not a backup offer. Be careful with terms. A secondary offer that would force us to make a decision.
I was actually just going to ask about that, Matt, when you said accepting backup offers. So ABO would be, you can just accept backup offers for whatever reason.
Just in case you
Like, yeah.
Yeah. So until the buyer's contingencies, not home to sell contingencies. So until a buyer's mortgage or a inspection, due diligence, or appraisal, mortgage financing contingency, until those are lifted, you can, I believe you can keep a home as ABO, which means, hey, we're accepting backup offers, but yours isn't going to go into effect until the first one or the one above you has a mutual release signed. And it also doesn't mean if I receive a backup offer that the first offer has to have some sort of first right of refusal. In this case, it does. So a backup offer is only if the first one terminates. This is different because this actually triggers the first one to have to make a decision. Okay, guys. Any other questions? Michelle, I think you just unmuted yourself and then started talking.
You mean muted yourself? and
Or,
started-
yeah, scratch that, reverse it.
No, I was just gonna say, because I didn't have a chance to talk to you guys Monday, and this is kind of off subject a little bit, but
Yeah.
Any recommendations what I should do with my listing in Plymouth now that the buyer's backed out?
Yeah, so Michelle is in a position where she was listed a FSBO, had to get it under contract for a lot less than they initially wanted, got it under contract, it fell apart. I can circle right back around and tie this in. I mean, I would reach out to all of the buyers the agents that have shown it. I would
reverse prospecting, and then I was
Yeah.
gonna do that. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I would even with your seller's, approval, I would actually email every single one and say, hey, the sellers would consider a home to sell contingency. If you understand this and you can explain it, and your sellers don't want to lower their price, they are the type of people that would maybe look at something like this,
Okay.
right? So when you have a seller, you have a listing that's maybe stagnant or is at an impasse, or you're facing potentially losing it or them not selling it, this isn't your bag of tricks, right?
Gotcha.
What's the worst that can happen?
Right.
You know?
I was thinking about doing a talk with them this weekend because it'll be 30 days on the market of doing another price improvement.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Showing them updated comps and such.
yeah.
Michelle, what was how do they feel about when they looked at the inspection and, all of that? What's their take on it? Your sellers?
I think they're disappointed, but they were not going to budge probably if the buyers came back, because the wife even told me that her husband wouldn't accept anything lower than what they already were going down to, which honestly, that's kind of that's kind of the issue with this situation. Because the buyers were scared to come back with a counter after the inspection because they realized they're going to have to put more money into it. You know, and so they didn't want to insult the sellers by even giving the buyer's agent a number to come back with. So, and I tried to convince her, I was like, please just have them give me a number and that I can take back to them. So even if this doesn't go through the, you know, trying to go back to them with all the information that I'm collecting during this marketing of their property and getting the feedback from everybody will maybe justify the reason for dropping the price again.
Is their house paid off, Michelle?
Yeah, it's free clear, which is the other thing.
I know.
Bummer.
Yeah.
It could open up a whole bunch of other buyer pool, but he is so stuck on that his house is ready to move in and it's not. And my buyer pool is very limited because it's going to take some, you know, end buyer that is willing to do the work themselves. And, you know, nothing glaring came through the inspection. But there's a lot of little things that are going to add up to significant, you know, investment into the property if they want to get to what they want. So.
Well, with any, you know, with any listing and any seller, I use this line, probably heard it 100 times now. You know, I am confident that the marketing that I'm doing to market your home, to get it in front of all the buyers and agents out there works. The only thing that we're experimenting with is price. And, you know, when we do roast my listing, we try to talk about all of the aspects of selling a home, you know, besides price, right? Oftentimes it's simple things like photos or, you know, missing information or description can mean a lot of different things. I know in Michelle's case, she's pulled out all the stops to do that. And experimenting with the price, the market's kind of spoken. And, you know, you either have to hold out for the right buyer, right? Or offer the right terms. And something like a home to sell contingency is potentially the right terms, meaning that if a buyer's got a certain amount of budget, they can't go any higher. They have this house they have to sell. They're not going to compete with any of the other houses that are selling like hotcakes. Maybe this is the type of home that they would. Yes, it requires work and this and that, but they can get it, right? So it could be a potential win-win. So that's the type of where my head goes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go off tangent there.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, that's exactly why the situations why something like this would make sense in a seller's perspective.
Okay. That's good.
Anything else, guys?
I know we're at time, but can I just ask one quick question about when we use the term first right of refusal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So having this 72, 48-hour contingency gives our buyer, right, first right of refusal.
Yep.
What about with ABO?
Mm-hmm.
Do they also get?
No. So if I have a listing, right, and I accept my sellers accept an offer on it, right, and it's $200,000. We've accepted an offer for $200,000, and it's contingent upon the inspection, appraisal, whatever. And then we're in wherever we're at with that process, and then I get another offer. It's for $210,000. Like, my sellers probably want to terminate that first agreement and take this $210,000 one, right? Because it's more money. But as a seller, I can't do anything to negate that contract, the first one, right, and accept that $210,000. I can accept that $210,000 as a backup, meaning if the first one has a mutual release, that we'll move that one in, right? But I can't tell the first people, hey, you're out. Now, what I can say is if they haven't had it inspected and then they come back and they ask for $10,000, I say no, because I have this backup offer. Why would I do that? Right? Now you risk the $210,000 offer flaking or coming back with the same things after an inspection, but that's the game. You can't tell that first position that you're out. But you can say, I'm not willing to do this, or I'm not willing to budge on it if it doesn't appraise, or that kind of thing. I'm not willing to extend it. Those kinds of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the difference. So, you know, the first right of refusal is the key part, which basically means, hey, buyer number one, you can still purchase the home with the terms that are agreed upon, but you either have to decide, but in order to do so, you have to waive your contingency to move forward and close within this period of time as specified on this addendum. Now, if you want to agree to something else or change the terms or whatever, you can. You know, that's the beautiful thing about agreements is they can be amended, but it has to be agreeable by all parties.
All right.
Okay, quick question.
Yes.
Does the ABO, is that specifically at the seller's discrepancy, or does that have to be agreed upon by both the seller and buyer?
The buy, if I'm representing a buyer and I submit an offer and it's accepted, I cannot, I guess I could say in my agreement that it says listing must
Well,
be.
RPA does say it has to be pending,
Yeah.
but the new MLS rule kind of negates that.
Yeah. So it depends. Yeah. It depends, I guess, on ultimately, like anything depends on what's agreed upon in writing. But no, I mean, I would explain to a seller, hey, this is what this means. And I did that, right? I went under contract and I said, hey, Mr. Seller, I'm not going to mark this pending. My suggestion would be to mark it ABO. And this is what that would mean. And they were like, yeah, why wouldn't we do that? Cool.
Okay.
And there was nothing in the buyer's purchase agreement that we had accepted that said otherwise, like Sharon just said.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
But again, ABO is the newer thing, right? And I don't think a lot of buyer's agents have a buyer's agent portal set up to show ABO, CCS, you know, as well. They're just looking, or coming soon. They're just showing actives. So it no matter what it is, it isn't going to be visible to other people. Because I think ABO, if you mark a home ABO, sites like Zillow say contingent as well, just like a default, because they don't have the same statuses that we do in our MLS, and probably every MLS has their own. So they basically are just coming soon, active, pending, or contingent, or sold.
Okay.
Okay. I know this is a lot. If you unpack it, it's not. But if you have a situation where this is viable, talk to Pete, talk to myself, talk to Sharon about it, talk to an agent in the ALC. Chances are they've used it. Make sure that your clients understand the pros and the cons. There's always risks involved. Download this. If Pete doesn't go over this in Pete's form, make sure you add this to your booklet. It's right in the Keller Williams library, both in DocuSign and .loop.
Yeah, it's in the booklet.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Perfect. So, yeah, knowledge is power, guys. If you have any questions, of course, let us know.
It's very helpful. Thank you, Matt.
Good. Next Thursday, I've got a guest coming and joining us, my friend and ex-business partner, Mark Schaffner. He is an awesome agent. He's a bit of a pretty boy, and he rocks social media. That's kind of his thing. And he's going to do $10 million as a solo agent this year. And most of his business comes from social media. And he's just going to kind of talk about pros and cons and things of the different platforms that he uses and how he does it. And it should be a good conversation. So next Thursday, 11 o'clock, mark your calendars. Be sure to be here and attend that.
Sounds good.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
See you Monday, accountability, 11 o'clock. I want everyone to be there. Everyone that's on this phone call plus a bunch, because that attendance has fallen off. And if you do not have accountability in your business, you will not hit your goals. Trust me on that one. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend. Let me know if you need anything.
All right, I need to figure this out.